You usually step into a superhero story expecting, well, a very specific kind of grandeur.
Right, yeah.
It's basically like buying a ticket to a massive fireworks display. You want to look up at a brightly lit sky and see this godlike figure soaring through the clouds, stopping a meteor, firing off beams of emerald light while the crowd below just goes wild.
Exactly. You expect the spectacle.
Yeah. It's loud, it's colorful, and the lines between the good guys and the bad guys are sharply drawn. It's comforting. But today, we are diving into a television show that takes that bright cosmic sky and just paints it pitch black.
Completely black.
We are looking at a narrative landscape that is actively trying to strip away the wonder and replace it with something incredibly murky, psychological, and entirely terrestrial.
Because the creators are trading the limitless cosmos for the blood and dirt of the American Midwest. This upcoming series, Lanterns, is attempting to take one of the most sprawling, sci-fi-heavy properties in comic book history and, well, grind it down into a gritty murder mystery.
Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're unpacking a creative gamble that is fiercely debated before it is even aired. We're going to explore the highly anticipated upcoming series Lanterns by unpacking a detailed breakdown of the show's plot leaks, the premiere episode's 3 distinct timelines, the intensely pressured industry context surrounding the release, and the showrunner's stated philosophies. Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
To really understand the bizarre choices happening on the screen, like dropping a space cop into a rural Nebraska crime scene, you have to understand the absolute panic happening in the studio boardrooms right now.
Oh, absolutely. The context is practically an existential threat for this cinematic universe heading into 2026. I mean, the financial and cultural stakes cannot be overstated here.
They really can't.
The studio is reeling from a severe string of box office catastrophes, and this culminated in Supergirl becoming the most devastating financial flop of the year.
Losing over $200 million, right?
Yes. Confirmed losses exceeding $200 million on a single project. When a cornerstone property loses that kind of capital, it doesn't just hurt the quarterly earnings. It completely shatters audience confidence in the entire brand.
And it wasn't just a quiet failure in a vacuum either. That massive flop was immediately, almost embarrassingly eclipsed in a single weekend by Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Brand new day.
Which is just brutal timing.
Brutal. To have your biggest swing strike out while your direct competitor hits a grand slam in the exact same breath, that creates a really unique kind of desperation. Add a looming corporate merger to that cocktail of failure. And the executives aren't just looking for a good show. They are demanding a definitive, undeniable cultural phenomenon. They need to prove the universe is still viable.
Which perfectly explains why showrunners Damon Lindelof and Tom King decided to entirely tear up the traditional superhero blueprint. They looked at the old formula of sprawling, CGI-heavy space adventures, like the widely criticized Ryan Reynolds film from over a decade ago, and realized it was toxic to modern audiences. So they pitched a radical departure.
Very radical.
They literally dropped the word green from the title. They openly called it a stupid modifier.
A stupid modifier? Wow.
Yeah, and they pitched a grounded rural thriller instead. They looked at a franchise defined by alien armadas and intergalactic police forces and basically said, we are going to make True Detective.
I mean, I understand the instinct to pivot, but the mechanism they're using to tell this story, Lindelof's famous mystery box structure, feels like a massive risk to me.
It's definitely a gamble.
For you listening, think of a mystery box like an endless set of Russian nesting dolls. The writers aren't actually selling you the tiny wooden doll at the center. They're monetizing the dopamine hit you get every single time you twist off a layer.
Right, the suspense is the product.
Exactly. The narrative is packed with sudden twists, hidden identities, and withheld information specifically to drive online theory crafting. But I have to ask, is a structurally deceptive terrestrial murder mystery really the right vehicle for a cosmic space cop whose defining trait is raw willpower and a magic ring? Or are we just watching a terrified studio overcorrect out of fear of past failures?
Well, the showrunners would argue that a legacy character must evolve or die. The mystery box technique forces audience engagement because it breaks the predictable rhythm of a superhero procedural.
I guess it's true.
If you hand the audience the exact cosmic adventure they expect, they might tune out because they've seen it 100 times before. By aggressively withholding answers, they're attempting to build suspense rather than spectacle.
So it's about tension.
Exactly. The friction you're pointing out, taking a character who usually solves problems with giant green energy constructs and dropping him into a mundane thriller, is the exact tension they are banking on to keep you watching.
And to see just how aggressively they want to break this character down, you don't really have to look further than the opening scenes, because they completely fracture the narrative.
They really do.
The first episode doesn't start with a heroic call to action. It splits the story across 3 distinct time periods to intentionally disorient you. It starts in 1996 with a deeply disturbing look at a young John Stewart.
Right?
John gets caught watching a television interview, like on 60 Minutes, with the famous hero Hal Jordan. And as a punishment, and supposedly to prove the boy has no fear, John's deeply unhinged father forces him to stand still while he shoots an apple right off his head.
It's a shocking scene, and it completely recontextualizes the core mythology of the character.
How so?
Well, in the comic lore, a lantern is chosen by a dying alien because they possess the innate ability to overcome great fear. It's an aspirational, noble trait, you know?
Yeah, it's heroic.
But here, the show suggests that John's fearlessness isn't a magical virtue at all. It is a hardened psychological trauma response to surviving domestic abuse. It grounds the fantasy element in brutal human reality.
Which sets the stage for the 2016 timeline. We jump forward 20 years and meet the actual Hal Jordan. And the man we meet is unrecognizable from the comic book.
Totally unrecognizable.
He is arrogant, profoundly lonely, completely disheveled, and struggling heavily with alcoholism. He doesn't feel like a legendary intergalactic protector at all. He feels like a washed-up liability who is awkwardly trying to train John Stewart as his backup.
The deconstruction of the classic hero archetype is just total. The narrative strips Hal of his unassailable confidence and replaces it with a deeply flawed, self-destructive human being.
Yeah.
It's a deliberate strategy to force the audience to reconcile the pristine legend of Hal Jordan with the messy reality of a broken man.
And their relationship introduces a lore change that, frankly, made my jaw drop, because it completely alters the mechanics of this entire universe.
Oh, the car crash.
Yes. Hal is speeding in a car, heading straight off a cliff. And to save John, Hal simply slips his power ring off and tosses it to him. John catches it, puts it on, and successfully uses it to survive the crash.
That simple action fundamentally breaks the traditional DNA lock rules of the mythology.
It really does.
Historically, a power ring is bound exclusively to its chosen user on a biometric and psychological level. If anyone could just pick up a ring and manifest their thoughts, the universe would descend into absolute chaos.
It changes the entire power dynamic. It treats the ring less like a sacred, sentient artifact that has judged your soul, and more like, I don't know, a loaded Glock that you can just toss to your partner in a shootout.
That's a great way to put it.
If the ring is just a tool, then the magic of being chosen is completely erased.
But by removing the exclusivity of the ring, the show lowers the barrier between the human and the superhuman. It implies that the power isn't in the cosmic jewelry, but in the trauma and willpower of the person wielding it. It's a democratization of the superhero concept.
Which perfectly aligns with their gritty aesthetic.
Exactly.
And that gritty aesthetic hits a surreal peak right after the crash. So John survives and goes to meet Hal at a neon-lit taco shop. But the Hal he sits down with isn't the disheveled alcoholic who just drove off a cliff.
Right, it's the construct.
Yeah. The ring has manifested a glowing physical construct of Hal Jordan from 10 years prior. This construct is younger, much kinder, and delivers a highly cryptic message. He says there's hail in Rushville, Nebraska.
It's such a striking image.
It is. Contrasting a broken man directly with the literal ghost of his past, idealized self, is a fascinating psychological visual. But it brings us back to that core question. Does stripping a cosmic god down to a gritty, depressive taco shop rendezvous make them more relatable to you, or does it permanently damage the fundamental magic of what makes them a superhero in the first place?
Well, relatability in modern television often requires the sacrifice of awe. When a character is larger than life, they are inspiring, but they remain distant. You look up at them. By tearing Hal down to a struggling alcoholic conversing with his lost potential in a cheap diner, the writers force you to look him squarely in the eye. You lose the magic of the invincible space cop, but you gain the intimate tragedy of a failing human.
It's a calculated trade-off.
Absolutely, to hook an audience that has grown cynical toward flawless saviors.
So following that cryptic message, our reluctant duo heads to Rushville, Nebraska. And this is where the grounded terrestrial thriller crashes violently into comic book absurdity.
It really is a culture clash.
Yeah, the contrast is almost comical at first. John Stewart, a superhero, having to fly commercial to get to the Midwest. But the tone shifts immediately upon arrival. They walk into the aftermath of a horrific mass shooting at a high school football game. There are 4 victims, but in a tight-knit small town where everyone knows everyone, absolutely no one recognizes the bodies.
And the local authorities treat the heroes not with reverence, but with intense suspicion and bureaucratic hostility.
Right. The local sheriff is entirely unimpressed by Hal Jordan introducing himself awkwardly as an agent of Green Lantern.
To her, he is an erratic outsider interfering with the local tragedy. This forces Hal to abandon any semblance of heroic protocol. To gain access to a suspect being held in the local jail, Hal intentionally provokes a bar fight just so he can get arrested.
Just to get thrown into a holding cell next to the target.
Exactly.
It is a remarkably reckless plan, but it leads to an interrogation scene that operates like a brilliant reverse Turing test.
Oh, the trivia test.
Yes. The suspect is a trucker who claims to be from out of town. Hal starts grilling him with mundane trivia about Nebraska football, which the suspect answers flawlessly. Then, Hal sharply pivots and asks where Harry Potter went to school.
Such a weird question to ask a suspect.
Totally weird.
Yeah.
And the suspect pauses and says, I don't read a lot, I watch a lot of football. That over-explanation is the trap. Hal realizes that a real trucker wouldn't construct a careful, logical defense of their reading habits. They would just tell him to shut up.
Right, they'd just be annoyed.
Exactly. The desperate need to explain perfectly reveals the suspect is an alien trying entirely too hard to simulate human behavior.
It highlights the show's emphasis on psychological deduction over physical combat. Hal isn't using a glowing fist to beat a confession out of the suspect. He is using the nuances of human conversational defense mechanisms to expose an imposter.
And the town itself is operating as a massive reflection of real-world anxieties. I want to note here that we are just imparting the sociopolitical elements of the plot neutrally, without taking any sides, to understand the show's context.
Right, just looking at the themes the writers chose.
Exactly. So Hal gets bailed out of jail by a wealthy, powerful local rancher named Will Min, who was harboring a private militia on his land protected by strict NDAs. And when Hal and Will sit down, they don't talk about space lasers.
Will launches into a heavy philosophical debate about colonization.
He calls it ugly from any angle.
Yeah, particularly bleak if you're the one getting colonized. The narrative roots itself very deliberately in the political and social climate of late summer 2016. By focusing heavily on rural militias, border anxieties, and the historical scars of land ownership, the show is utilizing the Midwest setting to mirror the cultural fractures of that exact era.
And even the alien suspect leans into this modern socio-political commentary. When he finally drops his disguise, he reveals himself to be the equivalent of a postgraduate student from a space university who majored in human studies.
Human studies.
Yeah, he delivers this incredibly condescending, hyper-intellectual critique of Earth, openly mocking humanity's obsession with violent sports while ignoring global hunger.
The socially conscious monster is a very modern trope. The threat isn't a mindless, drooling beast. It is an intellectually superior entity that correctly diagnoses humanity's flaws to justify its violence.
But just as you are settling into this grounded, hyper-intellectual thriller, the comic book absurdity comes roaring back in the most bizarre way.
Oh, the bomb.
The bomb. The alien delivers this sweeping critique of the human condition, calmly admits that he has a biometric neutron device woven directly into his skeleton that he can detonate with a single thought, and then the bomb explicitly starts beeping before it blows up.
Which is just hilarious. The audible countdown timer on a thought-activated, covert biological weapon makes absolutely zero logical sense.
None.
Why would an advanced infiltration unit possess an alarm designed to warn its enemies? It is a fascinating, jarring remnant of classic television suspense tropes awkwardly stitched into a narrative that has spent the last hour trying to convince you of its gritty realism.
It completely breaks the immersion.
Yeah.
But all of this careful plotting, the 1996 domestic trauma, the complex 2016 Nebraska investigation, the intricate dynamic between a broken mentor and an abused protege, it's all meticulously designed to make you care deeply about this partnership,
right,
which leads directly to the show's most controversial and shocking twist. We jump a decade forward to the year 2026. John Stewart arrives at the Nebraska ranch to find it completely destroyed. And lying motionless in the snow is the dead body of Hal Jordan, shot in the head, with his power ring missing.
The main character is just gone.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because this is the ultimate execution of the mystery box philosophy.
It is. The showrunners have been completely transparent about their methodology here. Damon Lindelof admitted this decision was engineered purely for its shock factor and the clapback.
The clapback, right?
To them, subverting every preconceived notion of what a superhero pilot is supposed to accomplish specifically by executing the primary draw of the franchise was a necessary turn to prove that the old rules no longer apply.
It's a massive rug pull.
Yeah.
And it relies on a very specific, historically criticized literary trope called fridging.
Right, killing a character just to motivate another.
It's exactly. For you listening, fridging originated in comic book criticism to describe the lazy narrative tactic of killing off a character, usually a female love interest, solely to inflict pain on the male protagonist and motivate his journey. Doing this to Hal Jordan is profoundly ironic. They have taken a legacy character and stuffed him in the metaphorical refrigerator solely to advance John Stewart's plotline.
The irony is entirely intentional. By applying a trope traditionally used on disposable supporting characters to a foundational icon, they are weaponizing the audience's meta-knowledge. You feel the sting of the fridging trope precisely because it is happening to someone you believed was structurally immune to it.
I have to challenge this exact philosophy, though. If a storyteller's primary tool is aggressively subverting your expectations by killing the exact character you tuned in to see, is that brilliant avant-garde television? Or is it a cheap gimmick that fundamentally breaks the audience's trust?
Well, avant-garde storytelling relies entirely on dismantling conventions. If a viewer knows the structural safety net of a genre that the hero always survives the pilot, then there is no genuine tension.
True.
Executing Hal Jordan guarantees the audience is destabilized and surprised. However, the risk you are highlighting is incredibly valid. A mystery box relies on the promise of a satisfying answer. If you continually pull the rug out from under your viewers just to prove you can, eventually they stop standing on the rug.
They just walk away.
Exactly. Trust is fragile. If subversion becomes your only narrative technique, it transitions from being shocking to just being exhausting.
So what does this all mean? If the main character is lying dead in the snow and our expectations are thoroughly shattered, what are the implications for the rest of the series? How do they sustain an 8-episode mystery without their leading man?
This is where the obscure clues scattered throughout the earlier timelines ignite the lore speculation. During the Nebraska investigation, the show explicitly establishes a crucial piece of world building. There are 14 different alien species currently operating within this universe that possess the technology to shapeshift.
14 different species.
Capable of passing as perfectly human right down to their cellular blood work.
You don't just casually drop a massive variable like that into a murder mystery without intending to use it.
Precisely. It is a deliberate breadcrumb. In traditional comic lore, the Manhunters were an ancient, rigid race of androids created to police the universe before the Lantern Rings existed, but they could not shapeshift.
Right.
If this new universe is adapting them into biological Manhunters equipped with perfect shapeshifting abilities, it creates a massive narrative loophole.
Wait, if there are biological infiltration units that can perfectly mimic a human down to their DNA, you're saying the body bleeding out in the Nebraska snow might not actually be Hal Jordan.
It is the most logical deduction. In a world with 14 shape-shifting species, every corpse is suspect. And if the real Hal Jordan is still alive out there, missing his power ring, it opens the door for the writers to radicalize his character path.
Oh.
The trauma of the last 10 years could push him to become Parallax, which, in the lore, is the literal physical embodiment of fear. The supreme irony would be the hero defined by overcoming fear being entirely consumed by it. Or he could transition into the Spectre, the cosmic spirit of vengeance. By faking his death in the pilot, the writers have written themselves a blank check.
It feels incredibly self-aware. They aren't just adapting a comic. They are playing a psychological metagame with the hardcore fans.
And to understand that level of meta-textual arrogance, you just have to look at Damon Lindelof's track record. To contextualize this, years ago, when he was adapting the revered graphic novel Watchmen for television, he sent a letter to its notoriously protective creator, Alan Moore.
Oh, I've heard about this.
Lindelof opened the letter by playfully, yet self-deprecatingly, referring to himself as one of the bastards currently destroying Watchmen.
He practically introduced himself as a vandal.
Exactly. And while Moore famously dismissed the letter as neurotic rambling, the anecdote is vital. Lindelof does not view sacred pop culture lore as a pristine museum exhibit. He views it as raw clay to be smashed, remolded, and aggressively deconstructed. He expects the purists to be angry.
So as we pull all these threads together, Lanterns is a fascinating high-stakes gamble. It strips away the cosmic wonder of a legacy superhero in favor of a fragmented terrestrial murder mystery designed to shock its audience from day one.
It's the ultimate gamble of prioritizing gritty realism over aspirational fantasy.
Which leaves you with a massive question to ponder long after you finish listening today. We live in an era where technology makes it incredibly easy, almost mundane, to put a grand cosmic spectacle on a movie screen. We can render exploding galaxies with the click of a mouse. So as that kind of limitless visual spectacle becomes commonplace, will superhero stories have to increasingly rely on dark, psychological, terrestrial mysteries just to offer us something that feels distinctly human? Or is there still value, still a necessary kind of magic, in just letting a space cop be a space cop? When the boundaries of visual effects disappear, the only frontier left to explore is the darkness of human psychology.
Keep questioning the media you consume, keep an eye out for those mystery boxes, and we will see you on the next deep dive.